The long-awaited resignation of British Prime Minister Tony Blair has finally been announced. He'll leave office next month on June 27th, just over a decade after he first took office. One of the chief architects of the Iraq War, his decision split opinion in the United Kingdom and many other parts of the world. But he defended them, saying he always did what he thought was right. Alan Fisher reports.
Today I announce my decision to stand down from the leadership of the Labour Party. The party will now select a new leader. On the 27th of June, I will tender my resignation from the office of Prime Minister to the Queen.
It was the worst-kept secret in European politics, and now it's official. Tony Blair will stand down as leader of the British Labour Party and resign as British Prime Minister in just over 6 weeks. What was no ordinary day started with the routine. Tony Blair's senior ministers arrived for their weekly meeting at 10 Downing Street. After less than 20 minutes, they were out, but no one would confirm Tony Blair had announced he was leaving. During the meeting, the man most likely to succeed him, Finance Minister Gordon Brown, paid what was described as a warm tribute to Mr Blair's leadership. From Downing Street, the Prime Minister drove to an airbase in North London. He took a private jet to the area he represents in the British Parliament, which is in the northeast of England. He always promised to tell them first of any plans he had in the future, and he stuck by that. The party faithful gathered to hear the announcement everyone knew was coming. For Tony Blair, it was a chance to outline his achievements.
There is only one government since 1945 that can say all of the following: more jobs, fewer unemployed, better health and education results, lower crime and economic growth in every quarter. Only one government, this one.
But he knows his time in office is overshadowed by the war in Iraq, and he knew he had to mention that too.
And removing Saddam and his sons from power, as with removing the Taliban, was over with relative ease. But the blowback since, from global terrorism and those elements that support it, has been fierce and unrelenting and costly. And for many, it simply isn't and can't be worth it. For me, I think we must see it through. I may have been wrong. That's your call. But believe one thing, if nothing else. I did what I thought was right for our country.
This is the start of the long goodbye for Tony Blair. He still has a G8 summit to deal with, an EU summit, a trip to Africa and also a trip to France, as well as very many important domestic issues. The earliest a replacement can be in number 10 is in 6 weeks' time. So he may have decided that he's going to resign, but he still has an important job to do. So now the race to replace is on, and soon Tony Blair will be a former Prime Minister. It won't be Blair's Britain anymore. Alan Fisher, Al Jazeera, London.
Well, for more on this, we're joined now by Sir Harold Walker, a former British ambassador to Iraq. Mr. Walker, thanks for joining us. Now, how do you think Tony Blair will be remembered, particularly in reference to his foreign policy in Iraq?
Well, there can't be any doubt that the major legacy he leaves is the catastrophe of Iraq. Plus, I think probably in the Arab world, but you can tell me, that he did not call for a ceasefire after the Israelis made a great assault on Lebanon. That was quite extraordinary.
What do you make of the legal basis for the war in Iraq, the accuracy of the intelligence, particularly the claim that Saddam could launch a chemical or biological attack within 45 minutes? What do you make of all that?
Well, the legal basis is a mystery. We have never been told in Britain the full advice given by our Attorney General to the government. And that is no doubt something lawyers can argue about till kingdom come. But there is no doubt in my mind that the government, in the shape of Prime Minister Blair, exaggerated the threat from weapons of mass destruction. I think that it was very reasonable to assume that Saddam Hussein, who had always shown great attachment to weapons, was continuing a program of weapons of mass destruction, but the evidence was, as far as I could see, that it hadn't got very far. So I think the government exaggerated it for their own purposes.
But despite the fact that no actual stockpiles of weapons were found, one argument in favour of the war was that it was triggered by Saddam Hussein's refusal to cooperate with UN weapons inspectors.
Yes, indeed, and of course that is true, that many times over the years since 1991 he did refuse to cooperate. But you remember, at the time the war broke out, the inspectors were actually in Iraq and were being allowed to do their work. It surely would have been good sense to allow them to complete their work. The Chief Inspector, Hans Blix, said he only needed another 6 months. But unfortunately, the Americans had a timetable and Tony Blair fell in with it.
So you do think that he was in fact influenced completely by the Americans, that he was Bush's puppet in this war, that this was in fact very much America's war in Iraq and Britain simply went along with it?
Oh, certainly, yes. I think it is very reasonable for any British Prime Minister to take as his starting point in foreign affairs that he wants to be alongside the American President. I think that Tony Blair had the right instincts in saying to himself, President Bush is going to go in for this war. It will be better if we are there with him and try to get him via the UN, try to get him to realize how important the Arab-Israel problem is, the Palestine problem. The trouble was that Tony Blair stuck with President Bush even when President Bush did nothing about the Palestine problem, and we couldn't get anywhere with the UN. There was a point when I think that the British should have said, as they did in the Vietnam War, oh, President, I'm sorry, we've come so far, we can't go any further. But our Prime Minister stuck with President Bush.
So Harold Walker, former British ambassador to Iraq, thanks for joining us. Well, when Tony Blair came to power 10 years ago, his Labour Party could rely on heavy support from Britain's ethnic minorities. But his decision to fight wars in Iraq and Afghanistan has seen Muslim voters deserting Blair in droves. Al Jazeera's Nazanin Mashiri reports now from the northern city of Bradford, home to one of Britain's biggest Muslim communities.
Decision-making is hard.
In this Bradford living room, British Muslims watch Tony Blair's speech.
Today I announce my decision to stand down from the leadership of the Labour Party.
The Prime Minister used to be able to count on their votes. Now they can't wait to see him go.
He has damaged the image of Britain. He has damaged the Labour Party. He has damaged this country. He has damaged the community relations. And sadly, this is the legacy of this Prime Minister.
He's had no choice but to resign. I think his cards were marked and he's gone.
Bradford has one of the biggest Muslim populations in the whole of the country. Around 100,000 Pakistani Muslims have made this Yorkshire town their home. This used to be a Labour heartland, but not anymore. Since the Iraq War, Tony Blair has lost the hearts and minds of most of Bradford's residents.
It were all right till the Iraq War, you know what I mean?
I feel he's done very well for the country. I think a lot of the little Spencers are better off now than we were when he came into power. But I think the bugbear is the Iraq War.
He thinks if you're a Muslim, you're a terrorist, which I don't think it's right.
3 of the bombers who struck London on July the 7th, 2005, grew up just a few miles from here. This Muslim community blames Tony Blair's foreign policy for an increase in extremism. One playwright who voted for Tony Blair in 1997 says it's the regular police raids and the stopping and searching of young Muslims that's alienating people.
We, in say 2 generations' time, will we continue to have young British Muslim men and women feeling disenfranchised, marginalised as a result of government policy that looks actually just to out a mere few but is affecting the majority?
With views like that, the next British Prime Minister will have a difficult task winning back confidence. Nazanin Mashiri, Al Jazeera, Bradford.
Syria's president has insisted his country is open to talks with Israel, but he also warned that the Jewish state was not ready for peace with Arab countries. Addressing the opening of the newly elected parliament, President Assad denied that Damascus had held secret talks with Israel. He said Syria would be prepared to negotiate on the basis of a return to pre-1967 borders. Assad also insisted that he was not obstructing the formation of a tribunal to investigate the 2005 assassination of Rafiq al-Hariri, the former Lebanese premier. So not much movement there on the Syrian-Israel front, but Israel's Foreign Minister Tzipi Livni is in Egypt to discuss reviving the Arab Peace Initiative. She's met Egyptian President Hosni Mubarak as well as the Egyptian and Jordanian foreign ministers who are representing the Arab League. Livni described the meeting as historic. It's the first time Israel has talked to representatives from the League.